Hey, I'm Nathan from Fatal Files. Influencers will do anything for a viral video, but what happens if they ignore the safety warnings to get it? From a truth seeker who stepped past police tape into a crime scene he had no business entering, to an explorer pushing deeper into a storm drain marked with flood warnings until there was no way back. It was October 14, 2018, in a quiet neighborhood in suburban Ohio. One house on the street stood apart from the rest. The windows were boarded up and yellow crime scene tape was still stretched across the front porch. No officers were around. Their presence had already been withdrawn hours earlier after evidence processing concluded. Elijah Coyle was 27 years old and ran his own online channel where he posted videos about things he said the public wasn't being told. He had a following that liked his no-filter style. He'd gotten warnings from police before for going into places he wasn't supposed to be. To him, that was almost part of the content. That day, he believed the investigation at this house had been wrapped up too fast. He thought they missed something big, and he wanted to be the guy who caught it on camera. I can sense that for Elijah, it wasn't just about finding the truth. It was about proving the official story wrong. He knew if he caught something investigators left behind, he'd be trending overnight. Emil Hale, his 29-year-old camera operator, came with him. Emil was more careful by nature, but he usually went along with what Elijah decided. Monitoring the live stream from a car parked nearby was Dana Ruiz, 25, their editor. She was watching everything in real time through her laptop. When they arrived, Elijah filmed the tape and the boarded up front of the house. He explained to his audience why he thought the police had moved too quickly. Then, he found a window on the side of the house. It already had damage. The frame was cracked, the board over it was loose. He used that to push his way inside. Emil followed. Once they were in, Elijah moved through the house slowly, narrating as he went. He touched door frames, ran his fingers along counters, pointed the camera at areas he claimed were important. Fingerprint smudges were being left on surfaces that investigators had already processed. He didn't seem to think about that. About 12 minutes into the live stream, the back door opened. The door had a damaged latch from an earlier forced entry, allowing it to open without resistance. An adult man stepped inside. He was carrying a backpack and stopped the moment he realized something was wrong. He scanned the room carefully, then began moving forward. I think the moment that man walked in, everything that was going to happen next was already set in motion. Emil felt it immediately. He whispered to Elijah that they needed to leave and began slowly backing toward the front of the house. Elijah didn't move. He lowered his voice, but kept the camera up and kept filming. The hallway between them and the back door was narrow, barely enough for two people to pass side by side. Emil tried to get around Elijah to reach the front exit, but Elijah's position and the camera equipment blocked the path. The man told them to leave. Elijah took a step toward him instead, raising the camera higher. The man gave Elijah a chance to walk away, but he didn't take it. What happens next will make him regret that decision. By that point, the distance between Elijah and the man had closed to less than 3 feet. The attack happened in a sudden, deliberate motion. The man stepped in close and drove a knife upward into Elijah's abdomen, the blade thrusting in below the ribs with force. Elijah's body jerked from the impact as he was physically pushed back into the shelf behind him, knocking items loose as they crashed down around him. Emil lunged forward to grab him, but Elijah was already folding under the shock of being stabbed. Before there was time to react, the man struck again, driving the knife into the side of Elijah's neck. The wound severed major blood vessels, and the blood loss was immediate. Elijah's body and the fallen debris partially blocked the front exit. Emil squeezed past and escaped while the camera stayed live on the floor. Dana heard the confrontation through the stream. She called the police and emergency services right away. Responders arrived at the scene, but by the time they reached Elijah, he was already gone. He was pronounced dead at the house from the 2 penetrating injuries, one to the abdomen, one to the neck. The man who entered the house was later identified as someone connected to the original case that had brought investigators there in the first place. He had returned to retrieve something he had hidden before the investigation began. Responding officers moved through the house and secured the scene. The man attempted to leave through the back of the property after the attack, but didn't get far. Officers located him a short distance away and detained him without further incident. He was taken into custody. Investigators documented what the unauthorized entry had done to the scene. Emil and Dana were not immediately charged, but the possibility of charges for the surviving parties was noted as still under review. The live stream recording was collected as evidence. I keep thinking about how Elijah had a clear way out and still stepped forward. The next story isn't about confrontation. It's about getting stuck in a place where there's no one to confront at all. It was July 9, 2017, inside a service building in Las Vegas, Nevada. The area was not open to the public, a back corridor used only by maintenance workers, with metal panels bolted into the lower sections of the wall. One of those panels had a warning label on it. It said the space behind it was dangerous and that only workers with a permit were allowed inside. Erica Vale was 24. She ran an online channel built around getting into places most people had never seen. Locked buildings, restricted rooftops, sealed-off tunnels. Her view counts had been dropping, and she needed something bigger, something no one else had done. That day, she wanted to be the first person to film the inside of a sealed ventilation duct. The warning label was right in front of her when she started removing the screws. To her, that label was probably just part of the shot. One of you once commented, "Some things you don't attempt even if they look cool. Know your limitations and don't tempt your fate." I couldn't agree more. That line nails exactly what Erica missed. Kyle Benton was 26, her cameraman. He wasn't just someone who held a camera. He had actual training in ventilation work and knew what these spaces could do. He told her to stop multiple times before she even touched the panel. She kept going anyway. The opening was about 20 inches wide. Erica went in head first, her shoulders pressed against both sides of the duct right from the start. She crawled forward, maybe 10 to 12 feet in, and the air around her was still and dusty, with barely any flow moving through it. The duct had been part of an older ventilation line that was no longer actively circulating air. The metal walls weren't perfectly even. One section had already started bending inward, damaged from age or weight from above. She breathed out to flatten her chest and push past it. That one moment, choosing to squeeze past a damaged section instead of backing out, was the decision that sealed everything that followed. I don't think she understood what that meant until it was already too late. Further in, the duct split into two directions. She tried to rotate her body to make the turn. That was the moment everything went wrong. Her shoulders and hips shifted diagonally, and the walls held her there. She couldn't go forward. She couldn't go back. And when she tried, the weakened section of metal bent further inward against her chest and sides, adding more pressure with every movement she made. What made it worse was that the more she struggled, the tighter it got. Her body's instinct to fight back was working directly against her. Kyle grabbed her legs and pulled. Nothing moved. He called for help fast, within minutes of her getting stuck. But fast wasn't fast enough for what was already happening inside that duct. 30 to 40 minutes passed. Her breathing got shallower. The metal pressing against her chest made it harder to expand her lungs with each breath. Panic burned through what oxygen she had left faster than her body could replace it. Kyle tried to force the metal open with his hands from the outside. The duct didn't give in. It was embedded within a wall cavity, limiting access to only one side, with no tools available to cut through reinforced sections. Her legs, which had been moving near the opening, slowed down. Then she stopped responding to his voice entirely. She was still inside the duct when she lost consciousness. The rescue crew had trouble reaching her. The corridor layout made it hard to navigate, and there was no easy access point built into the system. The duct itself wasn't directly exposed. It ran behind the corridor wall, fully enclosed. So responders had to break through the wall first just to reach the ductwork. They cut directly into the duct from that breach point, took apart a section of it, and pulled her out that way. She had no pulse. She wasn't breathing. She couldn't be revived. The cause of death was chest compression inside a confined space, not a sudden thing. Built slowly over those 30 to 40 minutes as the pressure held her chest in place and her body ran out of the strength to keep fighting it. That detail is the one I find hardest to sit with. It wasn't quick. Time was passing, and Kyle was right there, and still nothing could stop it. The incident was recorded as unauthorized entry into a restricted space. No permit, no safety equipment. Kyle did everything he could, so the outcome wasn't from a lack of effort. How many times have you brushed off advice because you thought you knew better? Erica's choices show just how dangerous it can be to ignore a clear warning. That one stays with me because it wasn't instant. There was time to realize what was happening. The next story is different. No slow buildup, just one small failure, and everything collapses at once. It was March 3, 2015 in Phoenix, Arizona. Despite the city's dry climate where rust forms slowly, years of irrigation runoff leaking onto the billboard's joints had caused unusually severe localized corrosion. At the bottom, there was a sign that said, "No climbing was allowed." Simon West was 30 years old and made videos of himself climbing things: towers, rooftops, construction frames, anything high up. He had a following that watched for the thrill of it, but another creator had just posted a climb of a taller structure, and Simon felt it. That kind of competition hits differently when your whole identity is built around being the one who goes highest. His goal that day was simple: get higher, get the shot, get it out before the moment passed. Nate Collins, 28, was with him on the ground operating a drone to film the climb from the air. Honestly, I get it. Someone uploads a higher climb, and suddenly what you did starts to feel small, and then you start to feel afraid of what might happen next. Before Simon even started going up, the condition of the structure was easy to see. The metal was discolored in patches where rust had been spreading. Some of the bolts holding sections together had corroded badly enough that the damage was visible from the ground. The billboard had also been through recent high winds, and there were stress marks along the joints and slight bends in some of the supports. Simon could see all of this. Nate noticed it too. They went ahead anyway. I've seen this mindset before, thinking a problem applies to everyone but you. What I don't get is Nate saw exactly what Simon saw and still chose to launch the drone. Simon climbed up to the walkway near the top without any immediate problems. The structure held his weight on the way up. He stepped out onto a narrow beam that ran beneath the billboard, the kind of position that would give the drone camera a clean shot of him with the city behind him. He shifted his weight to the side to line up the angle. One bolt gave way first. It didn't make a dramatic sound. Bolts weakened by rust don't always snap loudly. The beam dropped slightly on one side. Simon felt it and tried to shift his weight back to rebalance himself. That adjustment put more stress on the bolts sitting right next to the one that had already failed. They gave way too. The beam dropped further. Simon grabbed for an upright pole running along the side of the structure. For a second, he had something to hold. Then, the metal plate connecting that pole to the rest of the frame tore free. It had been holding on through rust and pressure alone, and it couldn't take the sudden load. That whole section came down. Simon fell about 60 feet. On the way down, he hit a crossbar, a horizontal metal beam at roughly mid-height. That impact alone was severe. He then hit the ground. Nate, watching from below through his drone feed, saw it happen. There was no movement after Simon landed. I don't think there's a version of that fall where the outcome is different. Once that first bolt failed and the rebalancing attempt put more pressure on everything around it, the rest followed quickly. There was no stopping it. Emergency services arrived at the scene. Simon was pronounced dead where he had landed. The combination of the mid-fall impact and the ground impact caused injuries that were not survivable. Structural inspectors went over the billboard afterward. The bolts had been corroding for a long time. Not just surface rust, but deep enough that they had lost most of their holding strength. The recent storm had added stress to joints that were already weak. To me, that's the part that stands out. The structure didn't fail because Simon was unlucky. It failed because it was already broken and nobody had fixed it, but the risk wasn't hidden. Simon had seen the corrosion, the stress damage, and the warning sign, and still chose to climb. The billboard was later removed and inspected after the incident, with officials citing long-term structural neglect compounded by unauthorized access. We've got more shocking influencer disasters coming up, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how ignoring every safety warning turned viral moments into fatal mistakes. It was August 22nd in 2018 at a riverside forest park along the Silver River in central Florida, an area where invasive rhesus macaques have been documented for decades. The park was open to the public and had signs posted near the areas where wildlife was known to gather. The sign said not to feed the animals and not to get close to them. There were monkeys in this park, macaques, and they were used to people being around. Leah Trench was 26 years old and ran a lifestyle channel online. For a while, her content had been doing well: fashion, daily routines, that kind of thing. But her numbers had been dropping. The idea she had that day was to get close to the monkeys, maybe get one to eat from her hand, and film the whole thing. She wanted her audience to see her as someone fearless and connected with nature. Javier Soto, 31, was her camera operator. He was there to film her. He also told her more than once that getting close to the monkeys was a bad idea. She didn't listen. I've seen creators hit that point where views drop and suddenly every idea has to be bigger, bolder. Leah's choice shows that some things just just aren't worth doing for views. Leah had brought fruit with her. She crouched low, held the fruit out, and locked direct eye contact with one of the macaques, a behavior that can be interpreted as a threat or challenge in primate social cues. The macaque lunged and bit down hard into her forearm. These animals are fast and their teeth are built for gripping. The bite was deep, not a surface scratch. Before she could pull back, a second monkey moved in. It bit her hand and wrist and left several deep scratches across her arm. The wounds bled heavily. She pulled away and dropped the fruit, and the animals moved off. Javier told her she needed to go get medical help right away. Macaque bites carry a high risk of bacterial contamination, including Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, and Pastorella. Leah wrapped her arm with something she had with her and said she was fine. She kept filming on and off for the rest of that day. Over the next 3 to 5 days, the arm got worse. The area around the bites swelled up, the skin around the wounds turned red, and the redness started spreading outward. The punctures sealed at the surface while trapping infection underneath, accelerating bacterial growth. The pain got worse instead of better. Leah posted updates during this period. Some of them showed her arm. She framed it as part of the story, something she was pushing through. She did not go to a doctor. By around days 6 to 10, her body had started losing the fight with the infection. A fever set in. She became weak. The infection progressed into sepsis, bacteria entering the bloodstream and triggering systemic inflammation, dropping blood pressure and starving organs of oxygen. At that point, the infection becomes something the body almost cannot handle on its own. She was eventually brought to a hospital after she stopped being responsive enough to take care of herself. Doctors treated her, giving IV antibiotics and fluids, but she was already in septic shock, where circulation collapses and organs begin to fail. The infection had already spread too far by the time she got there. Her condition kept getting worse despite everything that was done. Leah died from the infection. The medical findings were clear. The cause of death was septic shock from untreated deep primate bite infections. The bacteria found was consistent with what is commonly carried by primates. The delay in getting treatment, more than a week, was the key factor in how far the infection spread before anything was done about it. In the aftermath, sections of the river trail were closed, warnings were reinforced, and public health advisories stressed immediate treatment for any primate bite. Leah had time, days actually, to change how that story ended. That's what makes it frustrating to watch. The next one doesn't give that kind of time. It moves faster than most people are ready for. It was May 11, 2017 in Houston, Texas. At the edge of a neighborhood street, there was a large storm drain opening built into the ground, the kind used to carry rainwater away during heavy storms. A warning sign near the entrance said, "Flash flood hazard." On the inside walls, dark water stains reached about 4 to 5 feet high, left behind from previous floods. Grace Boone was 23 years old and ran a vlogging channel built around exploring places most people stayed away from. Her viewers had started calling her out lately, saying her content felt staged and too safe. That criticism got to her. She wanted to prove them wrong, to go somewhere genuinely dangerous and film it without flinching. That day, the storm drain was her answer. Tyler Grant, 24, came with her. He worked in construction and knew enough about drainage systems and flood behavior to understand what that warning sign actually meant. He told her the weather conditions made it a bad idea. The sky was overcast and there was distant thunder, not directly overhead, but close enough to matter. Grace had already made up her mind. I get why she chose the storm drain. It looks raw and impossible to fake, but a camera doesn't make you invincible. It can't save you either. What made this location especially dangerous was something Grace couldn't see from where she was standing. Rain didn't need to be falling directly above them for the drain to flood. Water from storms miles upstream, rainfall they couldn't see or hear from where they stood, was already feeding into the system and building pressure. The high water marks on the walls weren't decoration. They were a record of exactly what this tunnel was capable of. Tyler pointed that out. Grace acknowledged it and went in anyway. They walked about 200 feet inside. The water at that point was shallow, just ankle deep, slow moving, nothing alarming. Grace was filming. The air inside was damp and the walls were covered in a thin layer of slick green algae along the lower sections. Tyler stayed close to the entrance side, keeping his distance from the deeper sections. Then, a low, rumbling sound started somewhere in the tunnel. It was hard to tell where it was coming from. Sound moves strangely inside concrete tunnels, bouncing off the walls and making it difficult to figure out the direction. Grace paused. Tyler recognized it immediately and started moving toward her, telling her they needed to get out. Within about 30 to 60 seconds, the water went from ankle height to knee height, then waist height. The speed of that change is something most people don't expect the first time they experience it. It doesn't creep up slowly, it jumps. The current that came with it was strong enough that standing upright became difficult. Grace turned around to head back toward the entrance. She slipped. The algae on the concrete floor gave her no grip at all, and the current was already pushing hard against her legs. She went down, and the water took her immediately. There was no chance to recover her footing. The current was moving too fast, and the floor offered nothing to push against. Tyler grabbed onto a metal ladder rung set into the wall and reached out toward her as she was carried past. He couldn't get hold of her. She was already moving too fast. That moment, Tyler on the rung, arm out, unable to close the gap, is the kind of thing that stays with the people who live through it. Further inside, the tunnel narrowed. The water, now carrying debris, sticks, plastic, whatever had been sitting in the drain, pushed Grace into that section and pinned her against a metal grate built across the tunnel. The debris piled up around her. The water kept flowing. It didn't stop or slow down. It held her there, continuously pulling her under. Her movements slowed and then stopped. Tyler got himself out and called for help. Emergency responders arrived but couldn't enter the tunnel right away. The water level was still too high and the current too strong for anyone to go in safely. They had to wait for the flow to drop before access was possible. When the water level came down enough, they went in. Grace was found at the grate, still pinned there with debris built up around her. She was recovered and pronounced dead. The cause of death was drowning as a result of the flash flood inside the tunnel. Authorities secured the drain opening and added reinforced signage after the incident. Tyler later gave a full statement to authorities, explaining the sudden surge and confirming how quickly the water rose inside the tunnel. The warning that had been there before wasn't wrong. Just wasn't enough to stop someone who had already decided the risk was worth taking. One of you once commented that proving people wrong isn't worth your life. Watching Grace ignore Tyler's warnings, that line feels like the exact lesson here.